Perfect. So, as I've said, I'm George Margaritis now. Um, I've been writing code with Paris and Antonis for the past few years at Logic, and today we're going to talk about how I implemented the detach flag in these two commands, Docker stack deploy and Docker stack remove, which are commands that live in the Docker CLI ecosystem. And if you don't know, Docker CLI is the command line interface that anyone can use to communicate with Docker Engine. Oh. So now let's see how it all started, right? So I think that it was about a year ago when Adonis and Paris approached me with the opportunity to work on this issue. And we basically had an issue in our team that we wanted a bit more functionality when deploying with Docker Swarm. And it seemed that a lot of people also wanted it because, as you can see, the pre-existing issue that was created in 2017 had more than 100 likes. So what was the issue, actually? The previous commands that I mentioned, before the detach command was a thing, were running pretty much always asynchronously. And what that means is that the developer, pressed the command in the Docker CLI and then pushed enter, and then the Docker CLI displayed a few information about what services were deploying in the meantime, and then it exited. And that was pretty problematic because we also wanted to run a few commands after the deployment had completed, and the users never had the opportunity to ever know that information. So we needed this detach flag, and the detach flag allows you to, if you set it to false, then the CLI pretty much waits until the services were either, the stack is either deployed or removed. So, as I've said, this was something that many users really needed it. And as you can see here, one of them actually was ready to pay for this feature to be available on Docker. And it was something that it actually made me really interested to work on this issue. And so now I got thinking. This issue, as I've said, was created in 2017, and by the time that I got to it when it was, existing for about 6 years or so. And I got thinking, why did nobody contribute directly already? I mean, 6 years, it's a long time, and many users really needed this feature. So I was starting to think that maybe it was quite hard. Why did nobody even try it? So, well, we will see some of, I will tell you my opinion on why maybe this is, and we can have a chat maybe later. But the peculiar thing was that a lot of the users, 5 or 6 of them, were already trying to create solutions of their own. So, high-key bash scripts that were trying to circumvent the issue and try to deploy their stacks just like they wanted to. So right now I'm going to talk about how the contributing process went, and I forgot to mention that maybe some of the things that I will discuss right here will be mundane. So it might be interesting to the people that have not really contributed to a project like this, or maybe they're taking their first step as a dev in this environment. So let's get to it. First of all, what I did, and it was that, I tried to um, read the discussion really, really well. The discussion, I mean, that was on the issue. So I would try to really get the, context of what was the issue and get to the root of it and why actually users needed it and maybe how they imagined the solution, and also really paid attention to how the maintainers were thinking and what were their suggestions. So actually that was a discussion. And I mean, even from a UX standpoint, so right here the two maintainers are discussing how the flag should behave by displaying some output and info about the services that are deploying. And maybe it's a good idea to have progress bars. So upon this research, I came to this pull request, which was actually a previous implementation of the detach flag in two other commands that were not related to Docker stack command, which were the Docker service create and Docker service update. But as you can imagine, with these commands, you can just create and update services. So that was really what I needed right there and then. And it was a big starting point for me because it gave me something to look upon and, just check out the code, see what the maintainers were expecting of me to create, and how, going back and, looking at the discussion in a chronological order gives you a lot of context on why some decisions maybe were taken. And, that was a pretty good starting point for me. And it also, gave me a hint about what files maybe should be updated and what the code should be, how the code should be behaving. So continuing on, the first steps that I did after I tried to get as much information as possible, I, as always, clone the repository and try to build Docker CLI locally and use this local build in order to run Docker commands with my local build. And also, in the meantime, I try to check out the previous solution and get really familiar with the code and the code style. It was my first time, writing Go, and I had to go through all of the languages conventions. So it was quite a process, I must say. And yeah, that was pretty much my first steps. I tried to experiment and, break code and try some changes. And then I tried to create a proof of concept really quick. And that was a very rough implementation that, gave me a hint that this could work in real life. And I could iterate upon and make it better. So right now we're going to see what I did, a bit technical, but bear with me. So right here, we're going to look at the Docker Stack Deploy implementation. And if you think that this is pretty simple, it actually was. So this right here, this wait on service function was already implemented in the previous solution. So what I had to do was actually just wrap this up in a function, call a for loop with all of the services IDs that were deploying at the time. And, with this solution, the Docker CLI was waiting for the stack to deploy. Quite cool. So with Docker Stack RM, here it was a bit different because we could not use the same function as before, because now we had to do with networks, and we had to actually get on a higher abstraction level and use something called tasks. So tasks are, for examples, deploying a service or removing a network. So I created this function and defined a few states that were terminal for the task, such as maybe completed or failed or shut down or maybe something like that. So this runs until all of the tasks are in a terminal state, and then it just exits. So with this solution, the Docker CLI just waits for the stack to be removed. So my next steps after I, try to create a solution, I improved on it and try to, shape it up a bit. I actually went ahead and tried to do my first commits. So I, paid attention to the contributing guidelines. I learned that I have to sign my commit. I learned that I had to actually write tests for my code. And also, I had to write a really descriptive commit message. So I then committed my code and ran all of the tests. And of course, it went pretty wrong. So what was wrong in this case? It was actually one test that was failing, and it had to do with the cyclomatic complexity. And if you don't know what this is that cyclomatic complexity is actually a metric that allows you to define how maybe nested the code is or how many outcomes your code has. And the contributors in this project had a test that, they had set the threshold and your code had to be below that. So I fixed that by just wrapping a bunch of this code into this function and just calling this function directly above. And now I pretty much done the solution and I've opened my pull requests. And now the fun part starts, I think, because we're going to look at how the collaborating process with the maintainers went. I'll give you a hint, and it did not go really well. It went okay. So first of all, after I opened my pull requests, a guy that, it's not even related to the project, was a reviewer because he was a code owner of the files that I updated. And, that gave me a feeling that I might not get any reviews really soon. And that's how it went, really. So if you didn't pay attention before, I've actually opened these pull requests on May 5th, 2023. And after a month of opening the pull requests, I didn't get any reviews, so I decided that I had to, ping a few maintainers. And of course, after 4 months and the summer is gone by, I get my first comment, saying that I had to update this error with a lowercase because it's a Go convention. So this process went on for a long time, and we went back and forth with a few months in between, trying to make sense of everything. And, the difficult thing was that not that I was getting reviews really sporadically, but, it were comments like these. And I will explain a bit what this is, but I needed comments that provided me with actionable feedback and, stating that we can do 1, 2, 3, and we are going to get a lot closer to merging this thing. So what Sebastian says here is that the team has to decide if, we should implement the default behavior to be detached equals false, and maybe we should display a message and what this message might be and how long we're going to display this message. And that was really demotivating because, as you can see, that's already October 25th, and a lot of months went by. I've opened the pull request on May. So, getting comments like these were not really the best thing. So what I did in this case was just try to make the maintainer's life as easy as possible. So I went ahead and implemented this message and, let them decide if they want to keep it or not. And thankfully, we went ahead with the solution. And you might have thought that, everything is going well, but you're wrong. So we are now at February, this February. So a bit. So I think that it's 9 months maybe later, and I get this comment right here. And again, the same thing. Sebastian points out that there might be a new bug in my code. Really well, huh? Real fun. So what he says here is that in the auto-generated documentation that is generated for the Docker CLI by a very, very small library called CLI docs tool, the default value is missing for the detach flag, and it should have been true here. So even though that was really demotivating for me, I decided to jump ahead and try to find a solution or what might be going wrong. And this gave me a chance to close another issue in the CLI docs tool. And, it was a very, very simple if statement, nothing big, I promise. So if you take a look here, this issue was actually closed in 1 day. I know. So it really got me thinking, and I've come to conclusion that it has to be about responsibility. And when a maintainer merges something into their code base, they are exposing themselves, and they're taking responsibility that your code looks good and it might not break down the line, and open them up to future negative user feedback maybe, and stuff like that. So this issue that I've mentioned previously was actually a very tiny change in a very tiny library that had a very low impact. No one's getting hurt by breaking the auto-generated documentation code or whatever. And in contrast to the detach flag, which actually was trying to implement new functionality and add complexity to the project, I think that it had to do with the responsibility. So after getting this closed up, we finally got the approval, and the two pull requests were merged, and the team was happy. We had a big running joke that this may never get merged, and we actually we were discussing with Andonis that was running on DockerCon in LA, being a speaker, how to persuade the other maintainers and pay attention to the pull requests maybe. I think that it might have worked. So I want to take you back to my first question, which was, why did nobody implement a solution for this one? So as you've seen, the solutions were really not that difficult to come up. I mean, two functions that were just two for loops trying to wait for the stack or to be deployed or removed, nothing special. So I think that, shit happens and life goes on. And what I mean by that is that these users that were trying to implement their own solutions at first had the real problem in their hands, and they had to solve this problem right then and there. And they had to come up with hacky solutions maybe to, circumvent this problem. And I think that they didn't really want to wait 6 years or 10 months to get this merged, believe me. So now I just want to leave you with a few lessons that I've learned during this process. Um, First of all, don't be afraid to experiment. And I've intentionally put experiment here instead of try because I think experimenting is maybe more valuable than trying to, solve an issue and, take it easy. Try to experiment, check out your tools that you're using every day and try to see what issues they have and, just experiment. Nothing, no one's pressuring you. So I think it's really, really valuable. Next up, if anyone wants to really contribute to a project, follow the guidelines, and not only the contributing guidelines, but try to get yourself familiar with the project, how the maintainers are, writing code or what conventions they're using, and also how they're communicating, because that plays a huge factor too. You have to be swift and try to get the right answers at the right time. So with my last point, I just want to say, make the maintainer's life easier. And what I mean by that is that try to go an extra step, try to write another test case, do great work and just make it as simple as possible for your pull request to be merged. Um, that was it. Thank you. The functionality is ready, is out already, and starting with the newest version of Docker Engine, I think it's 26.0, and Docker Desktop as well. So yeah, that's it. Any questions? Go ahead.
So my question would be, so you kind of said this, but I'd like to you to expand a bit more on that. What was the hardest part? I mean, it was like a new language for you. It was e-code based, multiple different new things. What new thing was like the most difficult for you to adapt?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So getting um, starting to learn Go and all of its conventions was not that difficult, really. Just about a few days worth of work, but I think Adonis really knows what my biggest issue was, and it was actually that I was getting these abstract, review comments that it just wasn't actionable feedback, and that was really the pain point for me. Any other questions, maybe? Yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, I've already got experience and patience, so I'm up for it. Go ahead.
Uh, Thank you for the presentation. Uh, a silly question now that we've seen the things you mentioned. Did you check before committing your changes for other similar, let's say, requests that were merged in the code base to see how much time this took to be merged, for example, in order to, to have a first idea of how much it will pay?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Okay. So, thank you for your question. Well, as I've mentioned, it was I found a previous pull request that was, it had implemented the detach flag in two other commands, but I've never really noticed how long this took. But I think things were quite different in 2017. Companies had a lot of money, so they were really, really pushing on. So yeah, I don't have an answer for this. Yeah, yeah. I will check it out later. Yeah. Go ahead.
First, really nice presentation.
Thank you.
Just one question. If you were to go back in time, what would you have done different apart from probably checking the average review time?
Okay. It's a good question. So let's see. maybe I should have been a bit more prepared. And what I mean by that is, the first comment that I got was that a Go convention that, you should use lowercase errors in strings and whatnot. So might have taken, a slice of time maybe away. But other than that, I think maybe, responding a bit timely, because after 9 months, 10 months or whatever, you kind of get lazy, and I was responding maybe 1 month later. Yeah, we didn't have it didn't make sense. I was about to quit anyways. So yeah, go ahead.
So based on the presentation, I understand that it was the first contribution. Was it the first attempt in a contribution?
Well, it was my first attempt at contributing actual code. I've contributed to GitHub Docs and whatnot, but it was my first contribution, my first jab at, contributing code. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I guess that's a wrap.